Hi, how are you doing? This video is just to tell you a little bit about my new book, Pathways Through Grief. So why did I write a book about grief? Well, unfortunately grief has been a bit of a theme, a bit of a hallmark of my life, unfortunately. In 1984 both my parents died, my mum in February, my dad at the end of October, going over into the 1st of November. They're both 57 years old, so much too young to die in my opinion. And less than 2 years after both my parents died, one of our children died when an operation was unsuccessful. Added to that, I have conducted over 500 funerals in the old day job and visited all 500 families in relation to those funerals. And since those dark days back when my parents and our son died, I've lost close friends as well. And grief has been a bit of a stumbling block for me. It's been difficult to get through. So for 30 years, grief and loss have been the thing that have sort of been staring me in the face. I've read lots of books about it, but unfortunately never really found a book that was helpful to the kind of things that I was going through. So very reluctantly, earlier this year, I decided to start writing a book about grief. I tried to deal with the real issues in this book and the things that I've wrestled with, like when grief just won't go away, and the realisation that grief in many respects just feels a bit like fear. I wanted to write a book that would really help people who just feel so alone in their grief. When we lose loved ones, obviously what we really want is for them to come back and be alive again. And that's a real wrestle with grief and loss, that we know that that's not going to happen. So obviously grief is a very deep and complex subject, and this book is no way an encyclopedia of grief, and nor does it cover every aspect of grief. For example, I do touch on the death of our son, but the whole thing about children and grief, losing a child, but also children that have encountered grief and loss, I think that's a whole other subject. So this little book is really for adults who are struggling with the grieving process. This book also dispels some myths which are really unhelpful. So you may have heard of the 5 stages of grief, but the great deception about the idea that there are stages of grief gives you a false impression that if you say there's 5 stages of grief, right, I'll work through stage 1 as fast as I can, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5, boom, done that, got the t-shirt, I'm no longer troubled by grief. That, my friends, is just not how grief works. Well, realistically, grief comes in waves, and there's a whole chapter in the book on the fact that grief is waves and what some of those might be. And you may experience them or not. Grief is different for everybody. There's another section in the book that's on the whole idea of, someone will say to you at some time, well, it's time to move on. Personally, I find the whole idea that we lose someone very close to us and we can just move on, it's completely ridiculous. Just imagine for a minute you went away for a week with your spouse or your kids and you lost them. You lost your spouse or you lost your kid. Would you just sort of say, oh well, we'll move on and we'll carry on with the holiday? At the end of the holiday week, we'll just go home. I've moved on. I've lost someone, but I've moved on. The very idea is plainly ridiculous. And so no, I can't move on. What I can do though is move forward. What I mean is I can't move on and leave the one I've lost there where it happened, but I found maybe I can move forward. But when I move forward with them, with the memory of them, with the mark, the indelible mark that they left on my life. Moving forward with their laughter and their sayings and the things they did. Moving forward with their character. Moving forward I could probably do, given a bit of time. But I can't just move on and leave the one that I love back there somewhere and disregard them. When we lose someone precious to us, it's quite easy to start medicating our emotional pain. And that can quickly lead to addictions. And addictions can be anything, can be shopping, drinking, may even get into illegal substances, who knows. But generally just doing something obsessively to kind of medicate the pain of your loss. when actually what is better is to try and come to some peace with the fact that you've lost someone. And that's probably going to require your friends, may involve professional counselling, who knows. The other reason I've written this book is not, I wouldn't say that everything's all resolved as far as my losses in the past were concerned, but I've definitely come to a much more peaceful place and kind of embraced the grief and the loss. So this is the book. It's called Pathways Through Grief, and the purpose of that title is that everyone's journey is slightly different. So much like I'm in this woodland that I'm not really familiar with, and there are lots of different pathways, and grief's a bit like this, really. We can feel a bit lost, but the book is sort of suggesting different pathways through grief. Some you may have already tried, some you may not be aware of, and maybe some that you never even thought of. So my hope would be that the book kind of just inspires you to try new things rather than living with constant pain and possibly medicating that pain. Maybe you could try one of the pathways suggested in the book, or maybe actually that just while you're reading it you have an idea of your own pathway that isn't even in the book, but it kind of just opens your mind to other possibilities than the ones you've already tried. I've really tried to keep this book real. There's no trite or glib sayings. I think that kind of stuff is really unhelpful to someone who's grieving. You know, the type of thing like, oh, it was God's will, or they finished the work that God had to do for them, or God needed them more than you do. I know people who say those things are well-meaning, but it's really hurtful to people who are grieving to say that their needs don't matter. And sadly, the fact is, the statistics are that 100% of us will pass away at some point. Grief is the thing we never want to talk about, but it's really better if we do talk about it. You can actually try a sample of the book for free if you go on Amazon and you find the little button that says try a sample, and if you've got an Amazon Kindle ebook thing, it will send it to that. But you don't actually need a Kindle to read Kindle books. Any smartphone or iPad or any tablet, you can get the Kindle app and read ebooks on that. So yeah, you can get your free sample of the book, read a couple of chapters before you decide whether to buy it or not. But the book is out now in paperback and on Kindle, and I've left a link to where you can get the book below this video. And if you do get the book and read it, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a review on Amazon, because that just helps other people who are thinking about buying the book decide whether to buy it or not. So a little bit of a different video today, but thanks for watching all the same. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next video.